any time that we reward criminals for violating the law, which is what we're doing, they're going to continue to violate the law. There should be no, it shouldn't be a surprise that we're seeing the numbers that we're currently seeing, because we are rewarding criminality. We're rewarding criminal activity. You're actually coming to a part of the border that we have action, that we're seeing an increased problem. Vice President Harris didn't do that, nor did she actually go to the border to see the wall like what you just did. This administration does not have the political will to solve the problem that we're currently facing, and because of that, governors like yourselves, like Governor Noem, have to step up to the plate and do what this administration refuses to do. So again, I thank you. I'll reserve my comments for the press.
Great, thank you. I think we're ready to go. Okay. Good.
Well,
so I'll kick it off.
Well, I just want to thank you, Greg, for hosting us, and I want to thank all our folks from Florida who've been down here. When you made the call to ask for support, obviously the federal government had abdicated its responsibility. You had to fill the void, but you just needed some help. I asked some of my folks at the state level, is this something we could support? But I didn't want it to be something where like dragging people out here. All of these guys are volunteers. They all want to be out here. They all want to, the first wave we did, they wanted to stay. They didn't want to go back because they understand how important the mission is. And I think part of it is when we've had issues in Florida, Hurricane Michael, Texas came, Hurricane Irma, Texas came, Hurricane Matthew, Texas came, and in other instances. And so having mutual aid and working together as states is just something we always do. But I also think right before you made the request for support, I had been meeting with some of my rural sheriffs, and they said the #1 issue in our counties by far is the methamphetamine, and 95% of it is coming right across the southern border. And so this is having a direct impact on the lives of people in Florida and throughout the country. And so we understood how significant that is, especially if you don't have the resources, the full resources of the federal government pulling in the right direction. I think since then, what we've been able to learn, and speaking with my guys here today, and yes, I was able to tour some of the sites, the people that they're interdicting, when they ask them where your ultimate destination, now these are the Florida guys we're talking about here, 70% of the people they have interdicted said their ultimate destination is to the state of Florida.
Wow.
So this is something that every time there's a wave across that border, I'm not saying it's 70% in every single part of the border, but for here, it's the majority. Forget about, as I think as your director talked about, the high number of criminal aliens, people that have been arrested in the past. That obviously creates a public safety concern if they're going into your own states and your communities. But just the scale of this, in terms of the stress on public resources, school, medical, all these other things, this is going to greatly impact communities throughout Florida and I think throughout the country. So we appreciate the folks that have been here. We think that your success is really America's success. We need this to work. Obviously, we'd like to see the old policies, previous administration just simply put back in, because we know that would solve a lot of it. But until we get to that point, the states are going to have to step up. They have enough fentanyl just seized in June to kill hundreds of millions of people, almost 70% of our country, based on just June, the fentanyl that's coming in. So this is a really, really big problem, and I was able to see both by where the border wall is being constructed, as well as just people just coming across the Rio Grande, and you have people who have property and people are just going through their property, so we were able to see that as well. So we appreciate you stepping up where the federal government won't. We understand how important this is to not just Texas, but to other states, and we are absolutely going to see impacts in Florida and in other states if we don't turn the tide on this. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Governor. I think we, Texas and me personally, we thank Governor DeSantis and as well as the other officials from Florida who are here with us today. We appreciate your support, whether it be in personnel resources, whether it be aircraft, whether it be boats, but we need all the manpower we can get to repel the incredible number, the record-breaking number of people who are coming across the border. I do want to add that in addition to Florida, Texas is so proud to have support from other states, including Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, Arkansas, Ohio, and of course Texas is a partner in this effort with our fellow border state, Arizona. And so this is a national-based issue. And Governor DeSantis made the points of why this is such a national issue. And that is what happens at the border may be happening here today, but it will be happening in these other states tomorrow or next week or next month. And it could be challenges such as human traffickers and smugglers who are smuggling sometimes young children across the border, trafficking them into states of the northern part of the United States. It could be cartel members and drug smugglers smuggling drugs across the entire United States of America. And the worst of them all is fentanyl. As Governor DeSantis was talking about, the numbers are just staggering. First, understand this. Fentanyl is about 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine. 2 milligrams of fentanyl is a lethal dose. There have been, just by the Texas Department of Public Safety, enough doses of fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in the states of Texas and Florida, Nebraska, Iowa, South Dakota, Arkansas, Ohio, and Arizona. This is a situation where all states need to be a part of the process of stepping up, because the best place to interdict this criminal activity is not in Florida, it's not in Iowa, it's right here on the border. This is where the people are coming across. This is where we can make the biggest impact by having the resources on the border right now. To give you some raw numbers, if you just look overall, in the month of April, from last year to this year, there's been about 1,000% increase. In the month of May, there was about an 800% increase in the number of people coming across the border. According to Director McCraw, in Texas alone, in this fiscal year already, we've already set a new all-time record for the number of people who've been apprehended coming across the border, going back through the very beginnings of time since the numbers were recorded. And with each passing day, that record is going to do nothing but increase. So why is this happening? This is happening because of the massive change in policy by the Biden administration, where the Trump administration had in place the Remain in Mexico policy, as well as other policies that were working that did lead to a dramatic decrease in the number of people who are coming across the border. Those policies were abandoned by the Biden administration, and in their place, the Biden administration has imposed open border policies that has led to this incredible influx of people who have come across the border. In Texas, our first response began in March, and that was with Operation Lone Star, where we deployed both the Texas Department of Public Safety as well as the National Guard, altogether about 2,000 of them, to go about the process of making apprehensions, etc. Already together, they've apprehended around 50,000 illegal migrants, about 2,000 criminal aliens, and have disrupted about 40 stash houses. And then this past session, we have with us the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, and under his stewardship, as well as those of his fellow finance leaders in the Senate, they appropriated more than $1 billion taxpayer dollars of the state of Texas for Texas to step up and do even more on the border, and we appreciate the funding, Chairman Bonin, for that. And with that funding, we were able to add even more resources on the border. And then, you may recall, immediately after the session, $250 million was appropriated for us to begin the process of building the border wall, and we're working on additional funding for both of those needs. There's another need that has arisen that is a result of my conversations with local law enforcement, and that is we want to get away from the Biden administration approach of catch and release. We want to make sure that we arrest in jail people who are coming across the border. There were several steps that we needed to achieve to make sure that we would be capable of processing all the people that we intend to be arresting, and those have largely been achieved. There is a new booking facility in Val Verde County to process those who are arrested. The State Jail Commission has worked out a way in which we can jail far more people than what currently are being jailed. So these processes have been worked out, and we are going to begin the process of increasing arrests of people who are coming across the border. But all that said, one thing that everybody in Texas understands, whether it be Chairman Bonin, but especially whether it be the sheriffs who are with us here today, if we are going to be able as a state to respond even more aggressively, one thing we need is additional funding. One thing that is on my special session agenda as we speak right now is additional funding for Val Verde County, the county that we're in right now. The Senate has passed out that funding. The House cannot pass out that funding because the Democrats have fled the state and they've broken quorum, and the Democrats are making it impossible for us to be able to provide the funding that is needed at the local level. They need to come back, get back to work, and do their job of providing the funding to the local counties that is needed to help these local counties respond to a record-breaking challenge. Next, I'll pass it to the Director of the Texas Department of Public Safety, Director McCraw.
Thank you, Governor. Very quickly to underscore some points that you made. Clearly the Department of Public Safety's fentanyl seizures have increased dramatically. Methamphetamine's increased by 30%, which I know Governor DeSantis was concerned about it. And back to your point about securing the border and why it's so important why it's a public safety and a homeland security imperative. And one thing we know, we can conduct all the surge operations, high intensity operations we can. We've done in the past. But the difference is being able to provide the type of infrastructure that's necessary to prevent, because if the priorities of public safety professionals is to prevent, plain and simple. A wall or barriers that prevent people from coming immediately in and across the Rio Grande River is vitally important. And I appreciate your leadership in that area. I realize it's expensive, but at the same point, it's too expensive not to be able to secure our borders. And as we've discussed in the past, and you made it very clear that it's a priority of the state of Texas, and until we do, that people will suffer, but not just in the border region, as Sheriff Martinez pointed out, but in the communities throughout Texas and the nation. As we've heard from our partners throughout the country and our fellow colonels, is they've got a cocaine problem, they have a methamphetamine problem, they got fentanyl problems, overdoses, counterfeit fentanyl being produced in mass distribution by Mexican cartels. They got a border problem. So thank you for your leadership.
Sure, thank you. We are currently in Val Verde County. Val Verde County is a county that's been one of the hardest hit over the past few months, and the law enforcement officer in charge of helping his community respond to that challenge is Sheriff Martinez. Sheriff?
Thank you, Governor. I wholeheartedly agree with all the comments that are being spoken at this table. Funding is a big issue. Manpower is a big issue. Resources that need to be placed in the areas where that they can be utilized the best. Forgot to mention earlier that through Border Patrol stats, they have 51,000 known gotaways. So that's not counting, what we don't know came through here. The facility is going up here. It's going to help relieve the pressure of our local jail. So far, our community has lost about $150,000 so far since this operation began, because there's so many people coming through, so many people are being arrested. And like I stated earlier, all the jails in this area, they're busting at the seams. They can't hold anymore. We're having to turn people away at times. So any support that can be, directed to the border, we greatly appreciate it, not only by myself, but by the other 20 counties that their sheriffs would appreciate it also.
Absolutely. Someone who's with us here today but does not have a mic in front of him right now, but that's the Attorney General for the state of Texas, Kim Paxton. Our office works daily with his office on all the legal issues that we're grappling with to make sure that we can have a robust response to the border. And General Paxton, we thank you for what you do and the leadership provided by both you and your team. Of course. And then last, I want to call upon somebody who's been dealing with this for years, maybe decades. I don't know exactly how long, but may know the border challenges as well as anybody. And that is the president of the National Border Patrol Council, Brandon Judd. Brandon, thank you for being with us here today.
Governors, thank you. I'd like to speak to the media, if I could. The first thing that we have to do is we have to have an honest conversation. If we don't have an honest conversation, we will never solve this problem. If we don't look at what we need to do on the border, we will continue talking about this year in and year out. We will have governors that are going to have to step up and do the federal government's job if we do not have that honest conversation. The truth of the matter is it is not humane to not properly enforce the laws. It is inhumane what we are currently seeing on the border. It is inhumane that liberal policies are inviting individuals to put themselves in the hands of these dangerous cartels. It is inhumane that liberal policies are allowing the smuggling, and when we try to properly interdict these individuals, they just throw children into the river to distract us. It is inhumane to have people cross the border illegally in these harsh conditions. That is the reality. Whether you agree with me or not, if we don't have that honest conversation, we will not solve this problem. When we go back and we look at IRCA of 1986, it was supposed to end illegal immigration, that mass amnesty, but we did not put the enforcement protocols in place that would allow us to not be where we're at today. When we look at the win that Attorney General Paxton just had on DACA, when we look at that, we can't have the conversation of DACA or immigration reform if we do not have a secure border. Yet this administration wants to put the cart before the horse. They want to continue to deflect the conversation to what they say is inhumane, but what we see from a law enforcement standpoint is extremely inhumane and puts people's lives at danger. Another conversation that we don't have enough of is sanctuary cities. Texas and Florida, there aren't sanctuary cities. But this administration has effectively made every single city in the United States a sanctuary city. When ICE, under the guise of prosecutorial discretion, when ICE cannot respond to Jacksonville PD, Houston PD, because this administration will not allow ICE to respond to them unless the individuals that are in custody by local law enforcement have an extensive criminal record, violent criminal record, then we become sanctuary cities. This is another magnet that is inviting people to come across the border. If you ask me, do I want more agents or do I want policy? I will tell you every single time, policy is what will stop illegal immigration. When you get rid of sanctuary cities, when you reinstitute policies such as Remain in Mexico, when you get rid of that magnet that is catch and release, illegal immigration drops to all-time lows. That then allows law enforcement to target criminal cartels. It allows us to go after the fentanyl. It allows us to go after those dangerous products that are coming into the United States that are killing our children in rural, suburb, and the inner cities. We have to be able to do that. That is humane. And with that, governors, again, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for doing the job that the federal government is not willing to do.
Thank you, Brandon. We also have with us people who participated in our roundtable conference earlier. We have General Tracy Norris, who is the Adjutant General for the Texas National Guard. We have Chief Nim Kidd, who is the Chief of the Texas Division of Emergency Management, who I think has spent some time in Florida on some of those tours of duty that Governor DeSantis mentioned. We have Sheriff Coe from Kinney County, neighboring county. And we also have behind them people who work on the front line. You know, I've seen y'all so much, I recognize your faces now. And I thank them for what they're doing. It could be the National Guard, Texas Department of Public Safety, Florida law enforcement, Border Patrol, other law enforcement who are with us. We appreciate everybody who is stepping up to help the state and help the country deal with this challenge.
Also,
go ahead, please.
The Attorney General of Florida is here, Ashley Moody. And then the President of the Florida Senate, Wilton Simpson, has also accompanied us here today. And I would also be remiss if I didn't also thank Florida's National Guard. You know, they went on deployment last October to Texas, so they had about 290 folks there. That was a year deployment, and the Guard is going to re-up that for another year.
Excellent. Yep. Thank you for that. Renee?
Governor, what do you say to people who believe that taxpayer resources could be used from both states on the priorities that each of your states are facing right now, and that these priorities maybe are misplaced or distraction from the issue?
First, I would say that all of those priorities are very important, but for those who think that spending to deal with the challenges on the border, this is exactly why we have press conferences like this, so you the people across Texas and Florida and the country can hear about the challenges on the border. When you hear about the record pace, that already this year alone, there's been a record number of people coming across the border illegally, you see that we're dealing with a different order of magnitude of the challenges that we've ever seen before. But also, Wes, this is equally important, is a difference in the kind of people coming across the border. They're not just people coming from Mexico. They're coming from 150 different countries across the entire globe. And they're not just children or unaccompanied minors or things like that. Most of the people coming across the border right now are individual adults who are traveling for purposes, some of which are to be involved in gangs, in cartels, and crime. Part of it also is because people around the state and the country need to know what Sheriff Martinez and Sheriff Coe and their residents have been dealing with. The lives of the people in Valverde County have been disrupted more than ever before by the people coming across the border, whether it be having their yards or their fences cut, their cattle and livestock released, their homes invaded. It could be people who are brandishing guns. There are challenges that people in Valverde County, as well as similar counties across this region, are the people are facing those challenges. If people in Houston and Dallas were facing those same challenges, they would be demanding a response exactly like what we are responding to right here.
Help us understand just the Florida resources can do from a law enforcement jurisdictional standpoint.
Sure.
They're working with Texas.
I think that the best person capable of answering that would be Director McCraw.
Yes, sir. Simply put, numbers matter. And what our partners from Florida have been able to do is team up with our troopers, also our game wardens and our special agents, and doing the things that we've been doing in terms of prioritizing, high-intensity patrols in the area that cartels are exploiting for drug and human smuggling. They've been helping with arrests on those occasions. Certainly, game wardens have been on the river with our tactical marine unit around the clock, 24/7 in the hot zones along those lines. And certainly, their agents have been working with our agents to identify stash houses and to target the smuggling networks that are supporting the Mexican cartels in the area of operation. I can tell you, there's no single organized crime group in the world right now that's more violent, more ruthless, and more powerful than the Mexican cartels. And they've enlisted 16 of our tiered gangs in Texas to support their operations, criminal operations on both sides of the border, and retail distribution and the violence that goes with it, and the enforcement part of it in our major metropolitan areas. Yes, they're with us, but right now we're partnering with. What it also does, it makes it safer for our troops because we can double up. As opposed to single-man units, we're able to work as a team and have two. And believe me, in the area of operation and some of the things they've seen, it's important to have two in that regard.
I'll come back to a question. I want to add to this here real quick. Two quick things, and that is, if you look at the sheer number and the volume of the people coming across the border, there is a dramatic need for increased manpower, which is exactly what Florida provides. I do want to go back and thank the Texas legislature for passing a law this session that makes it easier to arrest smugglers. There are smugglers who are operating criminally in the state of Texas, and because of the way the law was written before this session, it made it easier for them to engage in smuggling without facing legal consequences. Now it's far easier to prosecute smuggling than ever before, and because of that, we are seeing an increase in the arrests of smugglers. Go ahead. The White House has to show the commitment to do something about it. Remember, it was the current White House administration that completely abandoned policies that were working. Remember, it was last year that we were seeing multi-decade lows in the number of people coming across the border. It was because of the Remain in Mexico policy. It was the Title 42 policy. It was other policies that President Trump was able to hammer out with the Northern Triangle countries that now have been abandoned by the Biden administration. So in order to get anywhere on the policy side that Brandon Judd was talking about, does require the Biden administration to have the commitment to securing the border, to enforcing the law. Here's the deal. This is very important. We actually have laws passed by Congress that regulate what is occurring on the border right now. The only problem we have is the Biden administration is refusing to enforce the laws that are already on the books, period. Oh, wait, Brent, go ahead. Wait, you have a mic. Go, Brandon.
we've got to stop talking about fiscal year. If we continue to talk about fiscal year, we're going to add 3.5 months of the Trump administration into that, and we know that those numbers were much lower than the Biden administration. What we have to do is we have to talk about the calendar year. This calendar year is going to exceed any other calendar year in the history of the Border Patrol. We've got to stop talking about the 3.5 months where the numbers were low under the Trump administration. Compare apples to apples. And if we do that, we've never seen anything like the explosion in illegal immigration like we have under the Biden administration.
Yeah, absolutely. So our Florida personnel have assisted with the apprehension of more than 2,800 illegal aliens, and they've assisted with more than 100 arrests for felonies of those aliens, including human trafficking, drug smuggling, and stolen vehicles. And so they have had a big impact. This has been very busy, but this is not even where, when people are talking about the border, they're really talking about further southeast of here. So they've been very busy, and they've had a really big impact. And I think those numbers are eye-popping. Certainly, we wouldn't have been able to ring up those numbers a year ago. There's just no way. But then, particularly for me, what's been the most eye-opening is the number of these people coming across illegally who are telling folks that their destination is Florida. Obviously, I knew we were going to get some, but I didn't think it'd be a majority. And again, this is from our guys. I'm not saying that's true for every part of the border, but that's a really, at these numbers of people coming. You have the drugs, which is one of the main things we're concerned about. You have criminal aliens. Director, can you talk about the number of people that you know that have previously been arrested? You talked about that previously when we were having a discussion. I think that's an eye-popping statistic.
Yes, sir. And keep in mind, it's just a snapshot. It's a very small number. But since June of 2011, through fingerprint-based checks, we know that there's been over 233,000 individuals that have been booked into Texas state jails for state crimes who had been previously handled by Border Patrol and were illegal at the time of their offense. Those individuals were responsible for over 370,000 offenses, criminal offenses, and thus far they've been convicted for over 147,000 convictions we've received. And again, I say it's a snapshot because it doesn't count the 10,000 that were in TDCJ. It doesn't count the ones that have never been handled by Border Patrol that commit a state jail and are here illegally. So it's a small number, and it doesn't recount any of the federal arrests as well. But yet it does show you the impact it could have, because 233,000, criminals, and then I talked about a little earlier, the impact as it relates to violent crime is there's concerns that we have.
And we just in Florida a few weeks ago, we had a criminal alien plead guilty to aggravated manslaughter, killing one of our sheriff's deputies in Nassau County. And this is somebody who had been deported multiple times, most recently came across the Rio Grande Valley, the Rio Grande River, and then ended up in Florida and did that. And so the impacts here, you can probably have a story in almost every community, in states in our country. So it's a really significant thing that's happening right now, and the policies need to change.
Well, and from what I understand your question, the message to those who were coming across the border, and that is in the traffickers, listen, there's a reality that people need to come to grips with, and that is almost everyone who comes across the border does so having to work with cartels and traffickers. Almost everyone across the border is going to have a price extracted from them. It could be money, could be additional money that will be extorted from them once they get across the border, but also it involves sex crimes as well as other types of crimes. It is a horrific, dangerous journey. It's one of the reasons why I think what the Biden administration is blind to, and that is because of the Biden administration's open border policies, they are enticing millions of young children into a life where they could be trafficked, where they could be harmed, where some lose their lives. And so the message is not worth the challenges that you may lose your life, as opposed to, and they just need to be aware of the danger that they're facing as they make that very dangerous trek. And those actually are the words out of Secretary Mayorkas himself.
Last question. How much longer are Florida state personnel going to stay here? Governor Abbott, is the state committed to reimbursing Florida for the mission?
Go ahead.
So we're going to have another wave. We haven't set the finite. I mean, obviously, we're doing this within an existing budget. We're making sure that all of our priorities are met, and we have a lot of stuff obviously going on in the state. As many of you know, we've had a big emergency response in Surfside, Florida, from a really unique and devastating tragedy that our folks in South Florida have had to deal with. So we're doing it, but we want to work collaboratively, and hopefully we'll get some other states to step up. I know some of them have. We obviously, our view is if we had a big hurricane next week, which we hope, obviously we're not going to have one next week, but if we had one this season, we needed someone. I know Texas would be there for us. And so we felt an obligation just because of all the times they've helped us, and then also how it impacts our state with the drugs, with potential criminal aliens, and then just with the stress on social services. If we're now one of the big destinations, education, healthcare, all these things, I think most people in Florida, we're a very pro-immigrant state. We have a heavy immigrant population, but I think they want it to be lawful, and I don't think they want people coming in, because of failed policies in the southern border.
All right, thank you guys so much.
Sure.
Thanks.
So listen, we're dealing with the trauma right now, and the first thing you do when you deal with trauma is you stabilize the trauma and you worry about the bills later.
Great, thank you.